public may address the ABR for up to 2 minutes on any subject not on the agenda. Is anybody here for that? Seeing none, I will close that portion of the agenda and move on to approval of the minutes of the meeting of November 1st. Can I have a maker of the motion?
So moved.
Gary, second by Keith. Any comments about the minutes? I wasn't here, so. Does anybody have any comments at all? Did anybody review the minutes? Okay. So all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? I'm abstaining. Oh, we have 3 abstentions. So these 3. We all abstained.
Your jacket probably not.
Yes. Thank you. So what do we have 3 abstentions, so we have to table that item?
I don't know. If it was a 2, nobody was opposed. We had 2 in favor.
Why were you abstaining?
Just because I wasn't here for you.
Oh, I wasn't here either.
No, you
So-
were here for that. I was here for the meeting. Sorry,
You were here?
Madam Chair. I was here for the meeting, but I wasn't here for the review of the minutes, so I was abstaining for that. But
Oh.
if we need a vote, I'll vote yes for in
I
favor
think
of the
we do
minutes.
need a vote.
It's fine.
We have 2 abstentions now and 3 approvals.
Okay.
So we're fine now. Did you get that, Gloria? All right. So moving on to the consent calendar. That would be for Monday, November 8th.
Okay, thank you. We had, on Monday, November 8th, we had item A, 535 East Montecito Street was continued 1 week to the full board. And that'll be our second item today at 3:40. Also, item B, 3707 State Street, got a final approval with conditions. Item C, 814 Orange Avenue, got final approval as submitted. Item D, 936 San Pascal, was postponed 1 week. Consent last week, November 8th, was reviewed by Gary Mosel and Chris Gilliland.
Okay. So do I need a
You can make a-
motion and a second? I need a motion for the
So moved.
Clay.
Second the motion, Madam
Second
Chair.
by Keith. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Do we have a consent for today, Tony?
Yes. For the ABR consent calendar today, November 15th, we had item A, 330 West Canon Perdido Street was continued indefinitely. Item B, 1623 Chino Street was continued 1 week. Item C, 212 West Arriaga Street, got a final approval with conditions. Item D, 130 North Calle Cesar Chavez, got a final approval as submitted. Item E, 401 Old Coast Highway was continued indefinitely to the Planning Commission. And item F, 936 San Pascal, was postponed 1 week. And consent today was reviewed by Gary Mosel and Chris Gilliland.
All right. So can I have a maker of the motion to
So moved.
Keith? Second by Chris. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. So we have announcements, requests for continuances and withdrawals, and appeals. Anything, Tony?
Chris Manson-Hing will be absent today, and Paul Zink is stepping down on item 1. That's all I have for announcements.
All right. Any subcommittee reports? Okay, then we're on to our first item, which is 1015 San Andreas Street. San Andreas. This is a project. The previous preliminary approval expired, and it's a proposal to demolish an existing single-family residence and detached two-car garage and construct a new 4,510 square foot duplex in the R2 zone.
So Tony, I brought in new stuff. Talked about, so I've got details, structural and whatnot. Do you want to look at these, or floor plan hasn't changed? This is just a more complete.
I just want to look at what we're supposed to look at, what Tony's going to allow you to look at. So.
The new ones are fine.
Okay. So you want to pull? Should I take this away? And you have 3 copies.
Yes.
Thanks. And your name for the record.
Benjamin Woodall, an agent for the owner.
Yeah, we need 3. One down there and one over here.
So you got a little bit of the history. It was
All I got was what was on my sheet that said it had a previous preliminary approval, and this is the first time this board has seen this, Tony?
Well, yeah, since a few
08,
years ago.
March of 08, I believe.
Okay.
That's the last time it was
So
looked
there's
at.
probably some people that weren't here, maybe.
Yeah. Do you have photos?
So,
Do you have photos in the file, Tony? Sorry. Should.
why don't you go ahead and start
Okay.
telling us what the project is?
So duplex, 2 residential units attached on an 8,000 square foot lot off of San Andreas. One of them's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. One's a 4-bedroom, 3-bath.
Let's see where it is.
It's right off the corner of Carrillo.
Just show us on the site
San
plan.
Andreas. It's an existing site plan. That's what's there now. Existing cottage from 1920, who knows, and a garage to be removed. New site plan. This is sort of below the vicinity, going up Carrillo Hill, up Meads, and then take a left on San Andreas. It's the first, or 3rd lot in on your right.
There was a different applicant.
There was
before, right?
Carlos Samara was
Yeah,
the
I
previous
remember
designer.
this. Does anybody else remember this?
So Carlos, for whatever reason, is no longer on board, and so I'm acting as agent now to try and get it through.
So let's look
for-
at the photos right here.
which I have not seen. These are Carlos's work.
Does everybody know where this is?
So essentially nothing has changed from what Carlos had done, other than we had to lower the building height by a foot to meet solar ordinance. Floor plan, layout, elevations, everything is as it was in 08. Some of the windows had to reduce in height because of the reduced floor height on the lower floors, but widths remained the same.
So this is the existing house. Do you have a closer photo of the adjacent property to the? I guess it would be
the
north.
apartment complex next door. This is the first time I'm seeing these photos too, so you gotta bear with me a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's it there. It's
So
two-story.
the 2-story,
Yeah, 2-story unit.
and then
next
another
door.
cottage to the.
And then another cottage to the south. And then the next property is a big church And directly behind it is a parking lot for the church. If you look at the blow-up, it kind of shows you.
Okay, let's look at.
So this whole section is
Just grass.
it's dirt, parking lot. It's gonna crack.
All right, so take us through the project.
So 2 units, like I said, the first one, the one on the street, closest to the street, is a little smaller than the one in the rear. I think it's about 400 square feet less. Let's get the floor plan. 3-bedroom, 2-bath, all of which are upstairs on the first unit. Come in the entry off the street, into the living room, sort of leads you into the kitchen. Small dining, washing, drying, power. Go upstairs. You want to do it unit by unit? Sure.
I think we kind of know it's a
You
duplex,
guys
so
know
let's
this?
just look at the elevations. Right?
Okay.
And we know the layout.
So I think Carlos did a pretty good job at what he did. There's a lot of undulation in the building. We played with a lot of different roof heights, pushing walls back, pulling others forward, thickening. The reveals on some of the windows are nice and deep. I've got details to show you. Different uses of material, like the header over the exposed lintel there, and some wrought iron. Hit a lot of the main, the typical details of the Spanish style that's around town. We've got the scalloped detail on the roof. We've also got the exposed beam. Some shorter overhangs, some longer. This section tells it pretty good too. We've got outdoor decks up above. The unit closest to the street steps down also from the unit in the rear, so it's less impact from the street.
Yeah, you have a landscape plan?
We do. So I haven't gone through this real thoroughly. Catherine Dole couldn't be here today. She's the landscape architect. But for the most part, water-wise planting, majority of it. I've worked up the preliminary stormwater management plan, and we're working with Michael Gerenser on the calcs right now. So we'll have those for final. The majority of the heavy lifting will be done by water cisterns. We've got about 2,000 gallons of water we're going to have to deal with up from the roofs. So we're proposing about 5 300-gallon, not really rain barrels at that point. They're cisterns, but they're about 36 inches in diameter, 5 feet tall. Where's that? My roof plan.
So going where?
And when we come back in, I'm expecting the landscape plans will be revised a little bit too. So mostly on the back of the lot here where we don't have as much open space, we're going to try and retain it in cisterns and then distribute it from there to be able to control the rate at which it.
Are you using any of these spaces for your private open yard space for your units?
Open yard space is all in the rear. I guess the majority of the private for the one in the front would be the decks, and then the front yard too as well.
Just your legal, where's your legal
The
private open air space?
1,250 square feet, or
Whatever you're required to have.
yeah, it's in the rear.
It's in the rear.
Yeah. So let's look at the site plan shot. So it's all this
Okay.
area.
So that's all for the second, the rear unit.
Well, it's for both of them. As it was viewed by the planners, it wasn't required to be separated into two.
Okay. Is that it?
That's
Do you
it.
have anything else you want to add?
I don't think so. No.
Okay. So we have public comment. Do we have anybody here to speak on this project?
I guess I do actually. I mean, ultimately, I'd like to request final. Is that something the board thinks they could support? Because I've got material samples, color boards, whatnot.
Do you have your final engineering?
Do have final engineering.
Hold on just
Sorry.
a minute. So is there any public comment?
Yes. Well, we had a letter from Paula Westbury.
Okay. So closing public comment and back to the board with questions with the understanding that the applicant wants final approval. Any questions from anybody?
A question about the street trees.
Yes.
They're not.
Existing magnolias right now, and we're not proposing to.
How many are there? It's not exactly shown on the plan. At least on the landscape plan.
It's not in the landscape plan. Yeah. On the site plan. There we go.
You might want to point it out on the
Yeah, let's do
camera.
it. And then on the big plan up here.
There we go.
The phone keeps ringing. Oh, yeah.
So it looks like there's one.
It's because he's not
Two.
speaking into the mic. Just bring it forward
Sorry.
a little bit. There you go.
There's, it looks like 1, 2, 3, maybe. 1, 2, 2. Is there another one in there somewhere? 2 magnolias, 18 inches in diameter. You can see them pretty clearly in the photo there. There you go.
Okay. And you're not modifying or anything?
No, those are going to stay.
As is.
What to be removed is a couple of existing avocados in the rear. 8-inch diameter, a ficus, and an orange. And then a hedge along here will be taken out.
Madam Chair, that's all I have for questions.
Okay. Any more questions? I had one that I'm trying to answer on my own before asking it, but maybe I'll just ask it. And that is, this is the apartment complex to the north,
Correct.
and that's that inset right in here.
Correct.
So I'm just looking for what is looking to that on your proposal. On the lower level garages, and on the upper level,
We've pushed the building back quite a bit. So the closet and the master bedroom.
okay. And that's, and this window is, let me look on the elevations.
Next sheet.
This window.
Correct.
I guess what I'm looking at is, even though that balcony is really close to the property line and it's not your fault, I'm just wondering if it wouldn't be better to move that window away from that balcony
shift it down the wall.
And I'll let I'll just let that remain for comments. But any more questions? Okay, comments. Keith?
First time I've seen this, it looks like it's, well designed and articulated. And I think if the board gave it preliminary before, it hasn't materially changed, that it seems appropriate to at least give it preliminary. It appears that most of the significant architectural details are here, so I wouldn't have an issue with final approval today.
All right. Clay?
Madam Chair, I second pretty much what Keith's saying. The only thing I'm not clear on are the finishes. Did you say you had finishes?
I do. Exterior finishes. So here's a palette, and I've got the actual samples, which I'll go grab. The exterior light fixtures.
It's two-piece clay tile. Did anybody look at the window details?
Yeah, they look like they would.
Because it's showing Milgard.
Right. Sorry. They initially were going to use Lincoln, I believe, and then they've changed their mind to go with Milgard.
So the details reflect Milgard?
I'm not sure about that.
No.
Where are the details? Let's look at those.
The details appear to be aluminum clad wood.
Right. Clad exterior wood interior, which is, I think that they're still proposing. Anyway. Plaster. Exterior tile. There's the roof tile blend, right?
Yeah, I think this shows it pretty well. I think we can see it.
Okay.
But thanks for bringing those in.
Sure.
What was this one?
Exterior tile on the covered porch areas.
Floor.
Floor tile. Yeah.
So let's get back to the window issue.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I think just to finish up my comments, I would suggest that we either go with a clad window instead of the Milgard. Those are my comments.
Okay.
I think the rest of the finishes look appropriate.
Gary, comments?
This was the proposed original.
Okay.
Not the color. The color is
Right,
to
right.
be a black tone, right? Brown tone.
And we weren't going to go over the outdoor living space. That was all covered.
No, we can go over it. Here, just pull that away for a second. What page do you want? The site plan?
We can go to the site plan. Tony, do we have the original site plan from the one that was submitted a couple of years ago?
I do. I have it right here.
What was the outdoor living space for the front unit?
That's a good question. That was kind of one of my questions when we were asking questions. And he said that staff didn't separate it. They just allowed him to do the open space back here. But they do have a balcony up in front on the second level.
A balcony on the
They
second
have a
level.
pretty big balcony, which is right, a deck, which is right here.
Yeah, which is
But,
probably as big
I
as the
mean,
master.
for practical purposes, these people are not going to be
These are the-
hanging out in this backyard.
Right.
Okay. So is that the
It,
original?
well, yeah, it will be. It's a family that intends on living in it and building it. But you're right. In the future, it could be anyone. So that's.
All right, so when we looked at it, there was this side coming here and here.
We don't have that anymore.
No, they do, and I was wondering why we had two side lots. The garage has an entry coming in here, and I was wondering what the purpose of this coming off the driveway was. And this is the entry. But I thought it was new, but it's not new. I don't have any comment to that. The only comment I would have is I prefer not to have that. I don't know about, not completely comfortable with the blend, with the colored blend type. But see how the rest of the board says.
All right, we'll see. We'll check that out in a minute. Chris?
Well, I think the landscape plan looks good, and so I don't really have many comments. I think the last time you were here, we had sort of a substandard landscape plan, so it's nice to see that we brought it back with the landscape architect on board. The only thing I keep looking at is this little nub right here. Doesn't seem substantial enough of a planter, and I don't know what the path of travel for the vehicular is. If you can make that bigger, or at least reduce the
Radius?
Yeah, the radius of the curves, just to make that seem...
Soften it up a bit, though.
Yeah.
Make it more realistic.
Beyond that, I'm fine with it. Quick question, though. Where's the trash area?
Trash enclosures. Garage. Trash. Yeah. Let's look at the floor plan. No, those are meters.
Okay, I'm not seeing it, so we'll want to see where the trash area goes, or make it a condition of approval.
Can that be in the garage? No, because it's
What's the
got
size of the garage that you have?
Right. So you got a little dedicated space for trash. Okay.
I don't know where
Let's
you
look back
got.
at the site plan.
Yeah. Is there any room left? Is it
See a
acceptable
lot of
here?
room.
Is that not a large enough space?
Except it's in front of a couple of,
Windows.
dining nook, is what they're calling it.
All right, I'm not seeing trash on here, so I don't have any additional comments. I agree with the window comment. I'm not real keen on the tile blend either, but it's not a deal breaker for me. But I agree with the window issue and the comment that Chris said about the
Trash enclosures.
no, about the
softening.
softening of that radius of that little bulb out. And the biggest issue for me then is the location of the trash, and I think that might keep you from getting final, but I'm not sure. I'm open to a motion, any kind of a motion, whether it's preliminary, reinstated, or what.
Excuse me, Madam Chair. The staff needs to verify that the project meets the stormwater management program requirements before a final approval.
Before final.
We get final and consent on it, probably.
I don't know. Let's see what.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion for, we'll do indefinite continuance back to consent with preliminary approval, and with the following comments: locate trash enclosure for both units on the site plan, adjust landscaping as necessary. The second comment would be the bulb out along, increase the radius of the bulb out along the driveway on the southeast side of the project. And the board prefers a wood-clad window system as detailed on the plans as opposed to the mill guard. And return to consent with your SWMPs completed.
So that's a motion for preliminary approval back to consent for final.
Madam Chair, I'll second the motion.
Seconded by Keith. Under discussion?
Under discussion, a quick question that may turn into an additional. Do you have a detail for the fence in the front yard?
I do. If you look at D2.
D2.
I don't see it.
I'm sorry, D3.
Oh. Okay, then no discussion, no additional.
Entry gate, unit 1. Where is that? Where is that? Oh, right there. It's high. Oh, it just looks high. It's not high. All right. Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Sorry, just to provide
Oh.
sizing for the members
Okay, the bar.
for the wrought iron.
Okay.
So that's an additional comment, Gloria, to
That's okay with
provide
me.
the size of the proposed wrought iron at the front entry gate.
Fine.
Any more discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
All right. So you can keep
one of these.
you can keep these two, and then we'll keep that one. And
This is red line on it.
we are on to item 2, which is 535 East Montecito Street. Is the applicant here? We're about 5 minutes early, so are you here for item 2? Nope. All right, so we'll take a short recess while we're waiting for item number 2 applicant. From consent for the addition of solar panels and change of roof material
They didn't bite me.
for the housing authority. And consent minutes state, continue 1 week to full board with the following comments. Study better integration of solar panels into roof forms. 2, provide more information on panels and proposed roof material.
Thank you very much. Bill McReynolds with City Ventures. We are currently a developer of the 535 East Montecito Street. And then Tim Luce, construction manager, will ultimately be building the community. And then with us is Addison Marks from SunPower, our solar provider, to answer questions. I passed out a lead checklist. I apologize. So we've had a preliminary lead rating on the community of gold. And so we realized with the addition of the solar panel, the photovoltaic panels, that we would be at 83 points, and that would actually move us up to the LEED Platinum category. The conditions of approval for the community require that we stub out the photovoltaics for the future addition of the photovoltaics. So we decided instead to just add the photovoltaics now in the ultimate construction of the community as conditioned. So we brought forward this plan attached regarding the photovoltaics, and there were some questions regarding from the Riviera what it would look like in terms of glare of the photovoltaics. Mr. Marks will address those conditions, and then in terms of integration with the clay roof tiles with the photovoltaic cells on top of it, what that would look like for it. So we did, and I'd like to kind of address the roof tiles first. So we did take a look at potentially a black composite asphalt on it, and just really didn't feel that it integrated well with the architecture of this particular building. And our recommendation is to look at potentially an alternative composite, but we would stay with the approved. Currently, we're approved where the first 3 courses are the red clay tile, and then the balance would be a concrete S tile. Our option at this point, in terms of the way the building works and looks at this time, we would like to keep it with the proposed. We do have a concern regarding the clay S-tile, clay tile in terms of to be on the roof. We will have to have annually have these cleaned, and then there's a wiring check that also occurs by SunPower that will be contracted with the HOA to provide maintenance of this, and then the initial install for the first 3 months as they get the panels just right, so that they get the maximum efficiency on them. So what we'd like to do, with the board's consent, is move to, on the third floor, a concrete S-tile on the entire third floor. We are conditioned for red clay tile on the first and second floors where it occurs. But on the third floor, we would ask that we go with a concrete S-tile so that it can be walked on as they're up there maintaining the panels on it. And with that, you have the array laid out regarding it. I guess there was one other question that Mr. Mosel had when we met, was in terms of triangular photovoltaic tiles, and I'll let Mr. Marks do that. Is there any questions that I might have, or can I turn it over to Mr. Marks? That's Marks.
Madam Chair?
Yeah. So you're going to continue your presentation and then...
Right.
Go ahead.
I just
Clay.
have one
That's
quick
fine.
question as you're doing this, because we're looking at 4 individual sheets with 4 individual buildings, but no site plans, so
I only got one. That was my question.
I have yours.
I'm not exactly sure which buildings we're looking at, so do you have an overall site plan that explains?
I do.
Great. That would help the
apologize for that.
presentation.
That's the same drawing, actually.
This is building 300. So the buildings are of all similar construction. So, go ahead, Addison, I'll let you.
It just says here, building 200, 300, 400.
Okay.
And these were provided by SunPower, as you can see from the diagram. Landscape plan. So the building on the hard corner of Montecito and Cali Cesar Chavez is building 100. Building 200 is on Montecito Street. Building 300 is in the corner. 200 is on the Montecito Street building. Building 300, I'm going to refer to as the one that's not on any of the streets. And then finally, building 400 is on Cali Cesar Chavez.
Okay. Do you have any, is that your answer your question, Clay, until we go to the rest of the presentation?
The plans around
Right.
because they weren't oriented.
Right.
Normal.
I get it. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I guess there was a question about triangular panels somebody had. Those are no longer manufactured. There was a company called Sharp, the electronics company that made triangle modules. They were taken off the market a few years ago because there wasn't a big demand for them. I understand the aesthetic reasons for them, but there is nothing like that available today. The other issue that I would address is somebody mentioned the glare of the panels. I brought a panel here. SunPower has kind of a unique way that we manufacture solar cells. The traditional solar cells you've seen in the marketplace are generally blue with conductors on the front face, and this is often where you get some of the glare. SunPower developed a solar cell that has the contacts, which are these silver lines on the back of the solar cell, so more light gets absorbed. So this is a 22% efficient solar cell, which SunPower makes, versus about a 14% efficient cell from most manufacturers. And the way we get that is more light is absorbed, so there's less that's actually reflected off of the system. The other thing, we were just out at the site, and if the concern is the Riviera community, most of the panels are facing south, which is the optimal orientation, and that is towards the ocean. So there wouldn't be anything facing the mountain area looking back down. So most of the panels, if there would be any type of reflectivity, would all be towards the south side, which is towards the ocean. So those seem to be the two issues that were resolved, but I'm more than willing to answer any questions about the solar.
terms of how they're laid out on the buildings, in terms of the efficiency we're trying to achieve, and everything like that.
Well, do you have a detail showing what they look like on the roof? That would help the presentation, probably.
Yeah. Addison.
Well, what I have is based on the composition shingle that we thought about, but I can give one of these out to everybody. On the left-hand side are a bunch of photos using the panels.
On the left-hand side, there's a
Yeah.
bunch of photos.
Yeah, on the
Here, why don't you show us?
back in here. So, example, here's a multifamily. Now, this is based on the last information I had, which I thought we were doing composition shingle.
Yeah, it would really help to have the detail of what because you're asking for a change in the roof.
Well, no, we'd be fine leaving the roof as it is, in terms of the approved-
material?
The material, yeah. We would prefer to leave it as is, based on the look.
Oh, I thought you were requesting to replace the entire third level with S-tile.
No, it's currently approved that way. Well,
No,
with
the first three courses.
Okay, I'm sorry. And I think I had a brief conversation with staff. We think that we can just find a location for a maintenance. So we would request that there be a 10-foot ladder section on the back of the building that would allow us to do just concrete S-tile.
So you're not requesting a
No,
change
we're not
in
requesting.
roof material
Based on what
right
we
now.
looked at, we believe it should remain as approved.
Okay, and
So
we
essentially-
and we did approve it. Well, I'll keep that for a question. So, so you just don't have a detail showing how the panels are installed on the over the S-tile.
Typically, you don't do it over the S-tile. It's typically, I think most of your installs are on a composition composite roof.
But you don't have a detail.
Do we have you? Oh, we have the detail that we provided in terms of how it attaches to the.
Specific photo about how it would look on the S-tile?
Yeah, because in some instances it's right up next to the edge of the eave. So, yeah, all of it.
You have one?
I don't. I'm just thinking what you would want to see.
We want to see if we can see them
If you can see them?
from down below, I think.
At 3 stories up, I doubt you will. And I don't have a specific
Well, I'll let you think about that while we
Okay.
go to public comment. Is there anybody here that'd like to speak on this project? Nobody in the audience? Tony, any public comment?
It's just a letter in opposition from Paula Westbury.
Okay, so I'll bring it back to the board.
In opposition of solar?
Don't worry about it.
Oh.
But yes, don't feel bad.
Oh.
So I'll bring it back to the board for questions. Keith? Anybody?
Comp shingles would be below the actual panels? No.
No, we'd actually do the.
They don't want comp shingles now.
Okay, so it's continuous tile.
Correct.
Okay.
Except for where the would come through the roof, but you would actually see that detail.
Don, why we bumped this up from consent was...
Oh, thank you, Gary.
That might help a little bit. Yeah, why we bumped this up from consent is we felt like that the patterns that were on this particular project was very eclectic and quite noticeable, and changed the architecture of the building. And we felt like it should be more integrated with how the roof lines are. And there were some instances where they had panels that were not facing the not on the south facing, and they were actually going to increase it. At least we were verbally told that they were going to put some carriaging underneath it to change the pitch of it. And I felt like we needed to see a detail of that, and I felt like I was under my understanding that there are other options as far as these panels go to integrate it triangularly with the roof structure. And there was also talk about changing the roof style to some asphalt that...
We did look at that, and we felt with the architectural style of the building that it was just...
So you're not changing the materiality of the roof, and you can't you're telling us you cannot do the triangular sections, but did you? So that's an answer to those two questions. But did you get an answer to us on what it looks? You didn't get an answer to how it's integrated into the roof, like into the clay tile roof.
Right, it's going to sit above the clay tile, so there'll be a stanchion or a mounting foot with a rail that sits above the clay tile, so you'll essentially be covering the clay tile with the solar panel. I don't know. Maybe I don't know if that picture would come up there. Maybe not.
No, neither.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well,
All right.
And the reason for the design like this is that we're trying to achieve the same of system size per unit. So for the electrical stringing or the configuration of the wiring, they've got to be segmented. I would have loved to have had squares and rectangles everywhere instead of something like this, but I would have to shrink the size of the system down, and we're aiming to get a certain percentage of the electricity provided by the photovoltaic. So we essentially had to put panels wherever we could, and they're all on the south or the west side. So nothing east or north.
Madam Chair, I was at the consent meeting also, and yeah, part of my concern, and I understand having to put them where you can, it just got very busy and a lot of strange shapes, and we were also concerned about the contrast between the color of the tile and the actual solar panel, so that along with how complex it all looks on the roof, it got very busy.
Did they change it from what you saw?
No.
No.
I don't think so. I mean, it's especially easy to see on
Especially if you look at an AR3.
A3 and A4. I mean, with these first few, you have large expanses of these solar arrays, but once we get to the like A3, we end up with a lot of little outcrops of these. And if you look at all the pictures you've given us, there's one that sort of shows how a lot of angles happening here. And to me, it's visually distracting and very busy. And so that's we wanted to bring it to the full board to just sort of bring that up. And I don't know how visible this is from around the city, but it's in a very prominent spot. And if you've seen that third floor from anywhere, you're really going to notice these panels. See, and it looks great when it's on a square roof as a rectangle, but once it starts getting very busy here, it's very visually distracting. And add the contrast between that and the shingle is, to me, what makes it sort of difficult.
Gary, you were going to say something else. No?
Well, my concern is also if you look on A3, that the different roof pitches are going to require different carriaging for the solar panels, and I really think that also is going to stand out because it's going to be perched up quite a bit higher, and those were concerns, and just a general layout of how it is, how it doesn't follow ridge lines and so forth, as is most of the photographs that we have actually do follow ridge lines and are somewhat symmetrical if you look through the photos, most of the photos. There are some that are different, but the concern is that how they are really jumbled around and not very symmetrical to the building.
I would add that each of the units is getting 1.8 kilowatts, and you have to be careful if you if you eliminate one panel, each panel is 225 watts, you get to about 1.5 kilowatts, and that's the borderline of, especially in a coastal area where they'll have enough power, enough voltage to turn the system on the inverter. So we want to stay in this system size range. We could look at cleaning it up a little bit and taking off a panel, but that would reduce the system size and the amount of power that each unit is going to be receiving, or the money they'll be saving. So there'll be a trade-off between making the arrays all rectangular, square, versus the amount of energy we're producing. It would just be taking panels off the roof.
Because you can't do the triangle panels, and you're proposing all rectangular panels.
Correct. If we wanted to eliminate like 2 hanging panels here and go for more of this type of
I
an
understand.
That's
array.
what we're looking at. We're looking at more like this type of array, not necessarily. The triangular would be optimum, but that's out of the picture. So we would like to see arrays that are symmetrical and not segmented where there's dog legs and so forth on them.
Simplified shapes.
Simplified.
Yeah, I get. So I have a question. Gary and Chris are talking about the fact that you have not big sections and then you have a lot of jogs in the panels. So, for instance, if you put one here, you put that one there, and you put this one somewhere else, have you looked at trying to, any way you can to, because this is exactly what you showed consent calendar, did you look at how you might be able to do that? Like put 4 here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and instead of 4 like this, and then jogged with that.
Yeah.
Did you look at how you could?
We did. There's certain restrictions, and in my company, I'm really big on aesthetics. For example, we have to provide a 3-foot clearance for fire from the ridge. We try to avoid staying near valleys and hips for water intrusion reasons, and there's not enough space down here to put another panel. So the roofs were they were tough to do solar. I mean, it's the honest truth. I mean, they weren't designed for doing solar. There's a lot of hips and valleys, and really did the best we could. And again, with SunPower makes the most efficient cells, and we're really at the threshold of providing just the minimum amount of power for these units. That being said, we could go through another iteration, maybe take out a panel here or there and try to clean it up a little bit, but it would reduce the amount of power going to each unit.
Just as a point of information, there will be no natural gas provided to these units. So all appliances will be electric. So we've met with the state regarding Title 24, and having electrical appliances typically dings you on your Title 24 calculations. So we met with the state, and they allowed us to use a new level of certification on it. So there are no gas appliances in here in terms of electric, gas, heating, or water heating. It'll all be powered off of the electric produced by these photovoltaics. So it is pretty critical that we maintain as big a system as possible.
I have another question. Are these roof vents?
Yes.
And did you move those around and work and change those, or did you just try to work within those roof vents?
No, well, in cases where you'll see a vent there in the field, we're going to be asking that those vents be moved.
Okay. Okay. Any more questions?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Keith.
Does the 3-foot perimeter for a fire access, is that, my understanding was that was all the way around the panel. Is that not the case?
It's really from the ridge, is the state guideline as it's written today. We can come all the way down to the eave, but we have to give 3 foot. We have to show it on the plans as 3 foot, is the way I understand it.
Flat roofs then. That answers the question.
That being said, it's a dynamic discussion. So
Yeah.
but one of the things that may help if we could encroach in that fire area a little bit. For example, this whole row here could be all one nice long row of panels without this kind of offset, and we could probably clean that up, but that would require, somebody from fire saying, yeah, you can encroach 6 inches or something. And
Okay. Comments? Oh, go ahead.
Two questions. One of them is, I don't understand if there's an HOA involved, homeowners association, why can't the whole complex have one solar system instead of trying to have 1.8 kilowatts per unit? Because that's tying your hands, because you can't take one panel off of here because then this guy's going to have more electricity than somebody else. I didn't understand that. The second question is, you have a lot of panels here because you have an all-electric construction. And if you went with gas for your water heating and gas for your space heating, then maybe you can cut your electric demand in half, which means only half as many panels we would have to look at, which then you can have a more pleasing layout. So if you can address those two questions.
Sure, I'll address the first. From the standpoint of why we're going to each unit, there's the California Energy Commission, the state jurisdiction, that has a program called the New Solar Homes Partnership that gives rebates to developers for doing solar, and they're pretty generous. And the way to do that is to provide this solar to each unit. You can also do the common area as well, but in this case, they felt that it would benefit the homeowners or the occupants to hit each unit versus doing one large system, because a large system is considered more of a commercial system and it has a much lower rebate, so it would be a much bigger cost to the developer. So the way the rebate structure is, you hit each unit, you qualify for the new Solar Homes Partnership. Technically, it's easier because you hit each meter versus being on the front end of the meter and providing power to the whole unit. If you provided one large system to this whole building, a big user may get a bigger benefit than someone who doesn't use as much power. So this is more equally distributed. The answer to the second question, I would defer to City Ventures because I think it was a strategy to go all electric.
And just in terms of when he says the developer, that's the price of the home, so it's not actually something that goes into our pocket in terms of it's just that we're able to provide the solar power at a reduced cost. So it's not something that's going to enhance our,
Right.
It's an additional cost. It is ultimately an additional cost to provide the solar versus allowing the homeowner to come in at a later time and provide it. In terms of the gas, we're looking for LEED's innovation points for it. So our idea in meeting with the state, asking them to relook at the way they do Title 24, was designed to allow us to pick up the innovation points for the design of the building on it. So we are not offering air conditioning standard. We looked at ultimately not providing it at all, but that was something that, do some market research. People do want to option for it. So, yeah, but we looked at providing as much as we possibly can as electric for the LEED innovation point.
Okay. So comments? Keith?
This points out the fundamental conflict between our 15th century architectural forms and 21st century technology. But, we ask for these articulated roof forms, and then we also ask applicants to put solar on it. So I think this is a good response that balances the demands of solar on these articulated roof forms. I think particularly since they're 3 stories in the air, a lot of them are internal to the project. I don't think they're going to be very visible. Where I would encourage some study is along the public road perimeter, where you have panels that are close to the eaves, that perhaps those could be, slid back 3 feet so that your viewing angle from the pedestrian is, you're not going to see those. So, I think the panels need to match the roof pitches, maintain the roof material as approved, and if there's any real question by any of the other members of the board as far as visibility, I think a quick overlay on your 3D perspective would give us a pedestrian's view of whether these are visible or not. But I think the majority won't be, and scooting back those at the edges will help that.
All right. Thanks, Keith. Clay?
Thanks, Madam Chair. I agree with Keith. I think this is a pretty big project, and it's a pretty aggressive solar design, and I think that if there's a way to consolidate the panels, as been discussed, and also move them away from the edge, I think it'd be a good improvement to the project. I don't think, just based on knowing the area, that this is going to be visible from really anywhere except perhaps on the freeway, which hopefully nobody's really rolling down the freeway or slow enough to be mindful of that. So I don't think it's going to be a visual deterrent. I think that the detail around at the eave where some of the panels get close, I think in the public right-of-way is probably good to push those back so that you've got it lifted up off the eave. You're going to see those panels. But I like the idea of this because it's probably the first, or one of the first large-scale residential multifamily developments in town that has a very aggressive.
It'll actually be the first United States under the new category that they just created.
I stand corrected. So, case in point, I think it gives us as a board and us as a city a chance to evaluate it. and to see how to do it. This might get built and everybody says, hey, that was the wrong way to do this and we shouldn't do that again, or hey, this was a great solution. But I think the overall benefit, the carbon footprint idea, the LEED certification, I think all those are pluses. And over time, nobody's going to know that that's a S tile on the roof and not standard mission tile, and nobody's probably even going to notice them after a while. So I'm supportive of it. I think if we can pull them away from the eaves along the public ways and any way to consolidate a little bit, I think it would be an improvement.
All right. Thanks, Clay. Paul?
I'm not going to say I'm against solar because that's silly, but I can agree with pulling them back from the eaves as well as from the gable ends. Like over here, if there was a consistent kind of, if you're always 2 feet or always 1 foot or some kind of thing, but a consistent detail here needs to be maintained as well as in the front. And that over here, sometimes you're tight and sometimes you've got a lot of room, and here you have no room. So that's something that we need to study and we need to look at. The second thing, I'm personally not okay with having an all-electric house so that you can get 3 extra brownie points on your LEED certification stuff. I find that there's cause and effect, and that's just me personally. LEEDs is a form that we follow, but it might have a negative effect, which is going to be the visual. So for the innovation points that you have, it's also increasing the amount of solar panels that you have to put on the roof. So, gas FAUs are very efficient, and they're 98%, and they even have, horizontal discharges, so we don't have to get rid of all gas in your structure, and maybe that'll save on the number of panels that are on the roof and change the design. And our town was built on aesthetics, so I think there's a balance between the two, but to have all electric just because that's the only way you can get the LEED Platinum, and now we have to have all these panels, I think we need to study that a little more carefully.
Gary?
Well, I still think there's a couple of avenues. We haven't really seen the details of how it's going to be mounted, if carriages are going to be higher, if the roof pitches, if pitches are going to be changing the solar panels, and that's information that I asked to see, and I still would like to see that type of information. I think it's a good idea to pull it away from the roof eaves, as Keith maintained. I still feel like geometrically they should be, that dog legs should be omitted, and it still should be in architectural form. And Paul made a good point about the gas. One of the things that kind of surprised me on a solar project or an energy or LEEDs project like this, that we didn't use any thermal solar on this, that there's no water heating solar, which is much more efficient as far as therms and energy exchange than the electrics. And I would think that by having some thermal solar on this to heat the water, you're going to have a much higher efficiency rating overall on it. So that would be one area that I'd say maybe you should look into, but that's not really part of this project. The thing that I want to most think about is this project is our geometric designs and how they're going to be mounted.
I would just say something on the solar hot water. I agree with you. There's just limited south and west facing roof space to be able to accommodate both technologies. So at some point, homeowners, developers, builders have to choose if there's not enough roof space to do one technology or the other. You either have to go solar hot water or solar electricity. In this case, we went solar electricity, but I could see using both and a different design, so I would agree with that.
Chris?
Yeah, I pretty much agree with everything that's been said. And I guess the only thing I certainly don't want to diss solar. So the idea here was to sort of clean this up as much as we can. And so, for example, I'm sort of wondering if can these be turned? Take these two, for instance, as an example, and put them this way so that this becomes a rectangle as opposed to an L shape.
You can't because of the racking system used.
Okay, that was what I was wondering.
It also doesn't do the 3-foot clearance, does it?
Yeah, it gets closer, but I see what you're saying, and it's
There's
just you
some
can't.
areas where you do get close over here, so that's why he drew that.
Right, and so that's what I was encouraging was just sort of cleaner rectangles and squares, and then that's pretty much all I'll say at this point.
Okay.
Okay.
So I don't have anything else to add. But what I'm hearing, if I were to consolidate the comments, is that everybody wants you to use solar in this project, and it's a matter of looking at it just one more time as to how you're doing those panels and making sure that you have gotten the best configuration and eliminated the most jogs in the arrays that you can. The other thing I'm hearing, and it was one of my requests, is just to show us a detail of where we think we're going to see it the most, which is at the roof eave, and
we'll try that.
and push it back if you can, and then also to confirm if you are creating a different pitch than the existing roof has, we'd like to see you illustrate that. So it looks like you're not going to necessarily get approval today, but there are some things that we're
happy
just
to provide
wanting
that
the
information.
clarification. So I'd be open for a motion
May I
on this
make
project
one?
really quickly.
Yeah, it's very easy. In terms of adding, at some transition point, in terms of a concrete S-tile to create the access for us, that actually comes all the way to the edge in the back. Would there be any issue with that, so that we're not walking on the clay barrel tile?
I'm not understanding. Are you talking about at the very front, and then you wouldn't be walking on the edge, at the very, very edge?
Right, we'd create access points at different points with the concrete S-tile versus the.
I think that if I can probably speak for the board, I think we'd all would just want to see what
Okay.
that's going to look like. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, and then I would say that, designate where those
Okay.
access points are.
There'll be a couple
and
of them,
minimize
yeah.
the visual effect of them, where
Okay.
they're located.
There'll be a couple of them just through the different roof pitches.
And if you have a different detail for what it's going to look like with the S-tile at the edge and what it's going to look like with the two-piece, then
Right.
show us the instances
Okay.
where you're using it.
And we would do that in areas that aren't seen from the public.
But mainly where they are.
Yeah, we'll highlight exactly where we're going to put them.
Does anybody want to make a motion?
They won't be in the front.
Madam Chair, take a stab at it. Ask the applicant, would you prefer a 2-week or indefinite continuance?
2 weeks. We'll be back.
Okay, so this would be a 2-week continuance back to full board with the following comment. Return with details of the typical panel mounting conditions. Applicant is encouraged to match the pitch of the adjacent roof forms. Indicate on the solar roof plans the locations of roofing material changes for access, i.e. the concrete tiles. Applicant is encouraged to simplify the layouts wherever possible, balancing the solar requirements for the project. Move panels away from eaves, particularly at locations that abut the public way, and study ways to provide consistency throughout the project with the placement of the panels relative to adjacent roof elements like gable ends and ridges.
All right.
Got it?
Do I have a seconder of the motion?
Second, under discussion, did you add something about the detailing for the carriaging for the supports for the solar elements?
I indicated, yeah, mounting details, all your typical mounting details for the panels.
And that includes roof pitch changes here.
Yeah.
Okay, any more discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Gary seconded it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We're excited about it.
All right. So, that's for you.
Yeah, just fold those over. They'll want one set this day.
Yeah, we want one set and then one copy of the specs.
I'll take this one.
One copy of the lead checklist. And we're on to item 3, 826 De La Vina Street.
The rest of it's ours.
We're 4 minutes behind.
ADR, that's a record.
Not really. Hello.
How are you?
Good.
Oh, mine should be easy. Just change of color.
All right, this was a returning back with a couple of comments that we made on our last continuance, which was there is support for the architectural direction of the facade improvements. Consider the red color carefully and study alternatives. Study the relationship between the color of the existing building in relation to the larger building mass. And 4, study the use of the wainscot on the street facade.
Well, I apologize. My printer, of course, went dead right at the last moment. But I think the color is actually better on these illustrations here. This is what I presented last time, and this is what we're presenting now. And basically, in terms of the colors that we're proposing, although it looks very pink here, it's supposed to read white with a bit of a blush.
It's very blush.
It's very blush. If you want to see a building with this color, it's the one on Eastleigh and State Street, that little Moorish building. It's amazing. It's white, but with these things, it could be even lighter than that. But the idea is that we would go to a white color, but not refrigerator white. They would have red on it. The background color would be something like this, and so I thought it would be interesting to really darken the larger building so that it can recede back and lighten the building in front so that it can come forward. That was one of the changes. And then as far as the doors and windows are concerned, I thought it would be easier to just get a steel unit that comes all the way down to the ground with some clavos maybe or something like that. And that's probably a cleaner solution for that. Again, completely open from the color situation. It's tough. Colors are tough unless you get 2 or 3 gallons, you put them on the building, and then you see how they behave. But the idea is that we would go to a fairly light at the single story, and then go darker on the background of the building.
So for those of you who don't remember what the larger building looks like, there it is.
At this point, there's no modifications proposed to be done to the building. Most of the windows on the other side are blocked, and I'm not sure why. And when we start working on the tenant improvements, we certainly can expose them, which would be nice. I don't know if there's any code issues being too close to the property line or something. We may or may not be able to do it.
Okay.
But
Is that it, Henry?
that's it.
All right. Do we have anybody in the audience that would like to speak on this project? None. Tony, do we have any letters?
Yes, we did get a letter from Paula Westbury.
All right. So I'll bring it back to the board for questions. Keith?
No questions. Henry, last time we talked about you were going to carry this parapet line back to return back to the... Yeah, okay, that's no question.
All the way around.
On this one story. Okay.
Madam Chair, I have a couple questions. What's the plans back in here? I don't see anything. Oh, great.
Currently, this is...
That helps. You're hiding stuff.
I'm not trying to. This is a shed. The idea is to wrap that as well, hide this roof. We have to do some work with the roof when we get to that point. But the idea is that we'll have a parapet all the way around. And keep in mind, this is an interim solution. This property, when the economy gets better, soon I hope, it's something else would happen to it.
Thank you, Henry. And then on this elevation, this is an existing wall?
Yeah, that's a. We have some photographs of that. That's a brick. Not a brick. It's a concrete simulated brick type thing, oversized.
Concrete block?
No, it's not concrete block. It does look like brick, but it's not brick. I don't.
Fake
We don't have a
We don't have
photo of
another
it at
photo
all.
of
Faux brick.
this? Yeah, it's a faux brick. I thought there was another photograph showing.
Do we have any more photos, Tony?
Yeah, it is. It is. But we could.
No.
We can leave it. We can.
You were just
replace
going to leave it.
And then my only other question was, what are your thoughts on these awnings, these little eyebrows that come over the entry?
What I was thinking is there are canopies that fit, steel canopies that fit within the opening of the doors, and then have the pin-mounted letters. And then underneath, what I thought it would be interesting is to have a lace pattern to create some interesting shadows on that. I think the maximum we can project on those, I think it's 36 inches or whatever, or 30 inches, I'm not. But that's to carry the signs, as you can see in this illustration here.
Okay, thank you.
More questions? Chris?
Excuse me. Just wondering, the faux brick wall, where is that?
That is surrounding a
It's got to
the
be by
parking
property
lot.
line.
Yeah, it goes.
It's actually,
Shows on the elevation.
And I have Tony has a plan as well. That wall goes on the De La Vina Street.
So it's far behind the
Oh yeah,
front, yeah.
yeah. That's supposed to
Right there.
be
the
what it
property
is.
line. In fact, you can barely see it right
So
there.
it is somewhat connected to the end of the building.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
More questions? Comments? Keith?
Only comment is whiten up the pink, but I think the other colors look good. I like the way you've done the bigger mass, the dark to recede, so no other comment.
Okay. Clay?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would agree with the color comment from Keith. I like this project. I just a couple positive notes. I like the window system treatment, and I think that that's the right solution. And I like your intention for the awning, the eyebrows over the entries. The only comment I have really at this stage would be that I think this wall looks out of place, and that maybe it should be plastered and match the building, but the rest of it seems pretty simple to me.
Thanks, Clay. Paul?
Nothing new.
Gary?
Yeah, I like the project too. I'm hoping that the roll-up doors that are behind the windows will disappear.
Yeah, it's going to disappear.
And the only thing that I would push is the windows you said that you may or may not remove, or there may or may not be some problems. I would hope that at least the, I believe those would be the east-facing windows, south, yeah. I would hope that at least you're going to remove the bars on those windows, or the west-facing windows.
West-facing, east.
Oh yeah. we can
I
do
would hope that you're at least going to remove those bars, and that's it. I'm even okay with the rosé.
Outside it was white. When it came here, it turned pink. But I see. I know. I don't want to
I
pink
can't believe it
building
did
either.
that. Chris?
I agree. I like the project, and I agree that the wall, I think, should be changed. You have this real slick facade and this sort of cheap utilitarian wall there, and I'd like to see those work together. Other than that, I think it looks good.
No, Madam Chair, the plan is to come back on in progress as we go along. There's still a lot of exploratory work that is being done here, whether this roof is going to be able to stay, whether we're going to remove it, we don't know that yet.
Okay.
And so perhaps an indefinite continuance, I don't know whether preliminary thing
Well, I think
fits
that
in here.
what you might get, if somebody would want to make that motion, would be preliminary today with some comments, and then you can come back in progress. But let's just see what the rest of the board wants. Does anybody want to make a motion? Does anybody think this is ready to move forward? I didn't have any additional comments to add. I agree with what's been said.
Yeah. Thank you. This will be my first motion. Make a motion for a preliminary approval with indefinite continuance back to the full board for in-progress review. And I guess with the only comment for the applicant to consider changing the material on the wall to the north of the building. Beyond that, we have positive comments for the direction of the architecture.
Do we have a seconder?
I'll second that under discussion. Henry, when you come back, I'd like to see some more just information, either plan and sectionally what's going on back in there, just so I can understand it better. It seems to be missing, but
We will.
thanks.
And I'd like to just state that along that comment to look at where you're going to do it, if you are going to remove the bars and how you're going to treat those windows back there. And then it's just kind of assumed that you're going to come back with details, and that would include an awning detail. So I don't need to state that, but how you're going to handle that steel detail, whether it's going to be waffle, partially open. Any more discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
Henry.
much.
Pink. Okay, so we are a little early, but I think this was a noticed project, right, Tony?
Thank you.
So do we have to wait a few more minutes, or can we go ahead and take this project early?
Should take it more than 15 minutes for
So we're 15 minutes. We're right at 15 minutes. Or 13. So we'll go ahead with item number 4, our last item on the agenda, which is 513 Garden Street. And I'd just like to say that I, for one, was contacted by the applicant to review this project, just to get my kind of loose opinion on the direction that the project was going, and I wanted to state that for the record.
Madam Chair? I'd also like to disclose that the applicants contacted me, and I met with them to look at preliminary designs and give some feedback.
Okay. So,
Great. Okay, you may, I thought Alan's going to join us. So, feel free to go first. Do you mind if I put up mine? These are a little prettier. Thanks. They're the same. I mean, I just print them on better quality. Thank you.
Would it be acceptable to conference call in the principal architect?
We'll find out. If you can just allow him to make that call, that'd be great. Hopefully he is available.
who's going to give the presentation for the project?
I will be.
Okay. So, do you want
that
the
your,
do you want the principal architect to
Just
make a comment, or
I guess would be to
To available
have
for
his
questions.
presence.
Oh, to be available for
Yeah,
questions.
for questions, yeah.
Well, then we might just want to wait.
Oh, sure,
unless
okay.
Unless
Oh,
we
yeah,
have a way to Skype him in, video on the video or something.
I could conference him call in.
Yeah, well,
Conference him in.
He's up in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we were going to, what we thought is he could conference call him in, and I believe he's actually watching, I'm hoping, watching on the video link,
Okay.
in which case he would have a full thread of what's going on.
I think right now, let's just do the presentation and see how it
Okay.
goes. And if we have any questions for him, we can get him on the phone.
Okay, great. Okay.
So, your name for the record?
I'm Barry Winnick, and thank you for seeing this. I'm the affiliate architect locally. The architect of the project is Mark Macy, out of San Francisco with Macy Architecture. And sitting to my left is the owner and the visionary behind the project, Alan Macy. He and his wife are developing this project. And to my right is David Black, the landscape architect. So that's kind of the initial introductions. And also thank you, because I appreciate the fact that you folks did meet with us early on and help give us some, a little bit of guidance on what we want to be presenting. The project overview, this is called the Santa Barbara Center for Art, Science, and Technology, and it's a project that's modeled after communities that you find in other locations. The inspiration behind it, in fact, was that Alan Macy was able to be a resident at other organizations where he was an artist in residence, in one case in Amsterdam, and saw how these communities work. And so that was sort of a beginning genesis point. What the center does, the idea behind it, is to bring together arts, science, and technology, to bring them together in a way where they can work together as an intentional artist community, to give artists access to ideas and equipment and materials that they wouldn't always have access to. And to have that in the heart of Santa Barbara, in the city, seemed like a remarkable opportunity. And in this particular center, there would be 9 residential units and commercial space for the artists to work. So it would be live-work in their own spaces and then a general workspace environment together. Of those 9 artists' residences, 7 would be pretty much permanent residences, and then the other 2 would be for visiting artists. So that way, again, they can infuse the group with new ideas, and that could rotate, for instance, on a 6-month basis. All the units are rental, and that way, and we're not using the word affordable. We're saying say reasonable cost, simply because I don't want to get into all that Section 8 and HUD sort of connotations. But the idea is to have the development be as inexpensive as possible in order to make it affordable and available for artists. Incidentally, one of the things that happened when we were meeting with community members and neighbors was to find out that other people have tried to put together these kind of arts centers, and usually it's too expensive for the artists to be able to reside there. So, you get this great ideal, but it isn't able to come to fruition. So we're really cost conscious on this project. Other parts of the project are a high focus on sustainability and renewable reuse of resources. The project has modular building units, which are reused modular buildings. It's no problem. I can give you loose sheets if you need. It has solar panels throughout, PV panels. Interesting, earlier it was noted that on that project that was over on, was it Quarantine? Montecito Street, that there was a use of just solar, for instance, solar electric. This project actually does have the use of solar electric as well as solar heating panels for the hot water, for the recirculated hot water. So it has both on its roof. There's water cisterns for management of rainwater catchment on site. There's also permeable pavement at the entry, as well as the use of electric bicycles that will be issued, one per artist, also parked on site and charged through the PV system. I think what I wanted to do is just give you a little bit about the site. And probably most of you know it because it's a stone's throw away. The site is on Garden Street between Cota and Haley on the west side of the street, right across from Planned Parenthood. It's a 1,450 square foot, 14,500 square foot parcel, L-shaped. At the back of the parcel, there's an existing pre-engineered building that's, I think, 1,441 square feet. And that will remain, and that'll become a workshop. The reason why I have this drawing up, I guess I'll just talk about this and then move it out of the way, is this gives you a good sense of the neighborhood. And what we identified by looking at this was that there's mass transit is readily available. There's the crosstown electric shuttle. There's both of the buses that go across from the transit center all the way over to Milpas and onto other locations. In fact, one of them, I think, goes on to City College. So there's a great ability for people to walk and move to their, be able to move around downtown without having to use their cars. There's also a spine of other arts organizations that are on the street. There's Art from Scrap right up the street. There's what used to be the Solstice Workshop, which is going to become a community arts center as well, right on the street. There's educational facilities nearby, which are shown on the map in different colors. There's other architects and creative businesses that you'll see throughout, which are identified, again, out there. So there's a lot of activity in the neighborhood that really supports the arts. And then we also just found out, looking at history a little bit, that there's even been an identification of the neighborhood calling it SoCo. So we're enthusiastic about people coming back downtown and having this neighborhood center that we'll be a part of. And then moving on to the site. On the floor. So that gives you the context of the neighborhood. You'll see that the neighborhood still has different, mixed development around it. There's a pretty much, loose collection of buildings to our south, which is the the Haley Cottages, as well as some other various different buildings using those sites. Across the street of us is Planned Parenthood. Across the way, very close by, is that recently approved project that was a mixed commercial residential project, which hasn't, I think it's either been finished going through ABR, and I think it's now on its way through the building department, which hopefully will get developed rather soon. And of course, there's Art from Scrap just up from the street. We can look at it here or go to... I'll walk you through the site on this if this is large enough for you folks to see. You're on this basic plan, or I can flip over. You know what? This is easier. So anyway, starting from the center entrance of the site, we've got basically, I'll call it almost like an archway that leads you in from the street, which then leads to the courtyard of the parking at the rear of the site. So facing the street are commercial buildings, let's say, that are the workshops for the artists. And then behind them, flanking either side of that same pathway, are the storage areas for artists. And then at the back, on the ground floor, is one of the residential units. And then at the very rear of the site is the existing pre-engineered steel building, which will be a collaborative artist workspace. And that space will have resources, again, that are not normally available to artists. It'll have things like CNC machines. It'll have 3D printers and just equipment that artists normally don't have. We sort of imagine it'll be shared much the way you would share at a photo studio before digital, before the whole digital industry took over, where you have your time that you know when you're going to be in there and get used to that equipment and share it. Also, you'll see in the plan coming through, this is the extent of where the regular pavement is. This is where the permeable pavement is. Around the perimeter are the cisterns for the water collection. This is the open area back of the site. At the front, and one of the things that this also is really meant to be like a classic urban infill project. So it does set back from the street 21 feet from the street edge. It's 9 feet back from the sidewalk, and that creates the first public area. So there's a public space in front of the building, affording benches so that there are places to be able to sit, as well as the potential down the line for public art and a place for people to congregate. The second public area really is the parking area. Our hope and intention is that the parking will be not overly utilized, and that will be a space where people can be. We are meeting, the planning requirements from the city requires that we have 14 parking spaces, but the intention for how this community will operate will be that people will be walking to site, riding their bicycles, and presumably parking less. And since they live here, they'll have less need to have, that more traditional means of transportation. There's also sort of an internal street which happens along the buildings here, which is sort of our internal paseo. See what else? I'll take you to the second floor, which basically the other thing just to point out is pretty much all the workspace is on the ground floor, and then with one residential unit because of handicap access. And then at the second level are the remaining 8 units. They're all work and live spaces, so artists can work in their own private space there while they're downstairs collaborating. And then on the third level, and you'll see that that's been stacked entirely over itself. And then at the third level, you'll see all the solar panels, the arrays. This is a section with the heating for the hot water, these kind. And then there's even solar arrays on the original building. And where there aren't solar arrays on the building, there's green roof. And so that represents all that. Here are the elevations. This gives you street context. And this is us here. But what you're seeing are both sides of the street. So this is the whole side of the street facing to the west, and that's the side facing to the east. That, for instance, is art from scrap, just to get your bearings, and that's the building adjacent that just recently was approved, and that's Planned Parenthood. And you'll see the intention here is to really stay in the same scale as the neighborhood. We did study schemes. In fact, I'll talk a little bit about where we are in the approvals process and planning. But we've gone from revision, or Scheme A through, I think, Revision K at this point. And the reason for that had a lot to do with how to fit the parking on site, how to get the right balance of residential to commercial use, how to fit within Measure E requirements, and also stay within, the right scale for the neighborhood. We did look, for instance, at a 3-story scheme along the way and really felt that the 2-story scheme was more compatible with the neighborhood and yielded the right kind of feeling along the street. 2 of the city's trees that you'll see are remaining. This was actually on our next door neighbor site. This one's on ours, so we keep those. And these are some of the elevations that are looking at from the different sides. That's the south. This is an internal, that's the north, excuse me, because that's the opening of the parking lot. This is the internal street, let's say, what you see when you're walking inside. So there's lots of glass facing internally. The reason why on the outer elevations you didn't see a lot of glass is simply that we're on property lines, and therefore we have a 2-hour rating. So we had to maintain that. The other internal street, again, you can see our new buildings up front with all the glazing, more glazing at the back side of the unit. And then somehow I lost the front elevation. I think it was at the very cover. I'm going to go back. Here it is. Front elevation. Sorry about that. And that gives you the overall. Thanks, Paul. And let me just see what else I want to share. I think what I wanted to do is just tell you where we are in the PRT, or in the planning process. We filed for a PRT, I think something like May 20th or so, in order to get the planner's comments on the original project, which at that point was Scheme A. And the comments that we got were really relative to Measure E, and then also things about environmental review. And so I'll just bring some of that up. So in Measure E, we were looking at that original scheme. We're looking for about 4,000 square feet to maybe 5,000 square feet of Measure E. And the planners at the time felt that this project, although they were interested in it and excited about it, they didn't feel that they would be able to support it going through on a point of view of community priority or
Economic benefit.
Thank you, Alan. Economic benefit. So they did ask us to re-look at that and see if we might think that there's another way to put it together. Interestingly enough, that at the genesis of the project, the very first thoughts was about it being more of a live-work space. And so that's how that scheme then got more developed. The other thing that happened is I think we were showing only 9 parking spaces at the beginning, and as a result of it going to having more residential development, we're now up to 14 parking spaces. So that put a little more pressure in terms of the outdoor area and less development on the site. And then I think we got our comments back in July from the PRT. We then went and filed a preliminary traffic report, which was prepared. The Phase 1 traffic was prepared by ATE with Scott Shell. That was submitted to the city in September. The city has acknowledged receipt of that and felt that the assumptions that were used in order to develop that Phase 1 report were sound. So what's good news is that we've got a project that presumably will not have a traffic impact, so that we're on the right path. The other issue that came up is just that there's an environmental concern related to the groundwater contamination from the Mission Linen site. And I don't know if you know, but some members know here for sure, that there's monitoring going on our property as well as adjacent properties as Mission Linen does the remediation of their site. So as a result of that, the city is just including that as part of the environmental review. I think you'll probably noticed on the noticing for the meeting, it said that we're here for conceptual, and that in fact it was still going through the environmental review for the city. So we seem to be moving along well in that process. So I think I'll leave the rest up to you guys for questions, and then.
Before we get into questions or public comment, do you have a landscape
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, David.
Thanks for the reminder.
So this plan reflects the disposition of all the landscape areas. This is obviously out at Garden Street. The symbol represents the 2 Chinese elms in the parkway that'll remain. Our intent is to use as many native plants, and we actually show sort of native alternatives, but that would be our first choice to sort of complement the sustainable character of this project. So we've got native agaves and deer grass and Lamas Canyon prints, and so we see it as being sort of a very sort of informal approach to the landscape. Inside here, we actually have a native desert willow that we might introduce here with the understory of coral bells, which is obviously native as well. This structure here on the ground floor, Barry's pointed out the structure on the 3rd floor is a green roof, but and so will this. And this is just a little sort of informal gathering space at the rear of the site that we developed here, with seat wall, small canopy tree and planting underneath. But that's the extent of it as it's laid out here.
Thanks, David. All right, so we have a couple of speaker requests. We have Laura Inks followed by Ginny Brush. If you want to come up, and somebody will maybe move out of the way for you to sit down.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name's Laura Inks, and I'm a friend of the Macy's, and I was asked by them to kind of get them connected to some organizations in town in search of support for this project. And what we found along the way, not only was there support, but there was overwhelming enthusiasm to become involved, right from UCSB to local education institutes, the high school, as well as various art organizations. And we have, I think in your packets, you have about 10 letters that we were able to get together from various organizations in support of this project. The idea of the mentorship piece and education piece, combining art, science, and technology, is very exciting for everyone in all three of those fields. And I was going to read one of the letters, but you have them in your packet, so I will end with saying thank you very much for looking at the project, and it's very exciting for all members of the community. Thank you.
Thanks. All right. Jenny.
I'm Jenny Brush, Executive Director of the County Arts Commission, and I serve as staff to City Arts Advisory and the Visual Arts and Public Places Committee. And I think what I'd like to do is to read a letter from City Arts Advisory into the record, because I think it best describes their interest in the project and their support for the project. So if I may. Representatives from SB CAST made a presentation to our committees at our October 21st meeting of this year. As envisioned by Mr. Macy, SB CAST will serve as a working studio educational exhibition opportunity for a number of working artists, scientists, and technical specialists. Much needed affordable housing units are also included in the project that is designed to meet the most demanding lead requirements. The project will serve as a creative community, as a center for innovation that makes effective connections between UCSB, Santa Barbara City College, Santa Barbara, and Dos Pueblos high schools. Conceived as an efficient, beautiful, and clean facility, Mr. Macy's planned project would do much to enhance the Santa Barbara creative community and provide a unique space for collaborative and creative innovation. The Santa Barbara Arts Commission, in conjunction with City Arts Advisory, recently completed a community needs assessment study compiled with input from the Santa Barbara Arts Collaborative and the Community Arts Workshop Space Task Force. The needs assessment study cited a continued loss of light industrial workspaces as a significant factor affecting artists and artisans. With the gentrification and development of the funk zone, raw and undeveloped light manufacturing spaces continue to disappear at an alarming rate. The city continues to lose artists and innovators who are moving to Ventura, and spaces such as the recently completed Working Artist Ventura or the WAVE project, or to North Santa Barbara County, where rents and studio spaces are more available and at significantly lower rates. Studies show that art spaces fuel innovation and engage community. Dynamic artist spaces and facilities also function as engines for cultural equality, social change, and innovations. Mr. Macy's incubator model has the increased value of cross-generational mentorships and will provide valuable career training experience. With plans for developing the community arts workshop space at the corner of Garden and Coda Street, and with its proximity to Art from Scrap, the SB Center for Art, Science, and Technology will add vital resources and opportunities to the growing synergy of this neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in the audience that wants to speak on this project? No. Do we have any other letters, Tony?
We have the 10 letters that we sent to you by email last week, and we have a letter in opposition from Paula Westbury.
Okay. All right. So with that, I'll bring it back to the board for questions. Keith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kind of walk us through some of your thoughts of the exterior materials, particularly along these the property line walls.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Would this be a good time to maybe
have Mark available? Yeah, might be.
Is that acceptable?
Sure. I'm trying to figure out how that's going to work with. Okay.
Excuse me, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Gloria pointed out that's a Brown Act violation to do a conference call like that at a public hearing.
Okay.
All right.
Well, then that's
Sorry.
squelched that idea.
Sorry, Mark, if you're watching. You can't speak.
We'll call him and let him know. I
But-
think he's expecting our call. So
You have Barry here
Well, I'll
as your guide.
I'm going to do my best to channel Mark. No,
Okay. So,
not to be so presumptuous. So, thank you. You brought up the right image. So, Keith, the issue along the property lines is the is the fact that it has to be 2-hour rated. So, one possibility that we looked at was just to, in fact, use these are the ISBUs, was to just use the material of the ISBUs and.
What is an ISBU?
It's a basically. I always forget what the. Thank you. He would know. And another terminology for it is reused shipping containers that basically are turned into modular construction forms. And in this case, one of the things that we looked at early on was to use intumescent paint on it. And I have actually met with the building department and shown them statistics that show that it's viable. So that was one possibility, but what's being shown in the drawings is another possibility, which seems probably would be easier with the building department for approvals, and it's a basically pre-manufactured panel that's an insulated panel that's 2-hour rated up against the building, and it has a sort of a cementitious ceramic finish to it. It is probably the best way to describe it, but it's sort of a hybrid cementitious ceramic. One of the product names, actually, I think I have the name with me, is one's called the 600 panel series, fire rated wall system. Another one's the Omega Fire. This kind of gives you a little indication of it.
And then the fences, drawings are implying glass or some sort of transparent, or is that?
It's a metal fence. It's not glass. That would be fun.
So when you say metal, like a perforated or something that you can see through?
It's a metal mesh, and it's on a rectilinear grid. It's a painted metal mesh, so it's not like chain link.
So, but it does have some.
It's meant to be as transparent as possible, but it's meant to be on an orthogonal rather than a diamond pattern that you would see with a chain link. And you'll notice that, in fact, because of the way we situated a large length of that parking lot, because there's no requirement to rate along the parking lot, is open with the fence along it.
No more questions.
all right. Claire.
Madam Chair, I have a couple questions. Going back to this fence, it looks like it's probably around 12 feet high.
Probably.
Is that a conditional use on the property line to have a fence that tall, or do we have any issues with that
I
height?
think it's commercial.
Yeah, we're commercial, so we're allowed to build on our property line. So our building could be up to 60 feet. So
Okay.
I don't think there's a problem with it.
This building back here is existing? This is the
Yes.
existing metal building in the rear of the project? What
Correct.
is this dotted line here? This one, is that the...
That represents the roof. Let me just make sure.
So is this building changing, or is it staying?
There's another one here, too.
Yeah, you know what? Those are other buildings adjacent.
Foreground?
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
And
No,
then-
we're not changing. The existing metal building, its envelope will stay the same in terms of its shape. It will get, restored. It's kind
So it'll
of
change
it's kind of-
color and
it'll change
clean up,
color.
new
It'll-
doors, windows,
It'll get new
roll up.
doors.
Okay.
exactly.
solar panels on the top and
Yeah,
Do we have a photo of what that looks like on
yeah,
this
we
packet?
do. We definitely do.
We didn't even look at these photos.
Yeah, if you need, I can pull up others, but yeah.
That is this building.
That is that
here.
building, exactly.
It's
There
that
it is
building.
again.
yeah.
There's another picture.
Right. And I think that was showing the neighbors with the dotted line, in fact, represented that building. That's the neighboring property. So.
Got it.
Any more questions?
Not yet.
Two questions. On the floor plan, there were 11 storage units, but there's 9 residential units. Did I miss that 2 of them are for the visiting people?
Actually, it's 9 residentials total, including the visiting. The other 2 are, servicing the commercial spaces as well, the collaborative space.
Okay.
So, you're right. We haven't written the operation program, but the intention is that each artist would have their own storage unit. But there's always need for more storage.
Plus 2 more.
And
Plus 2.
plus a little extra.
Exactly.
And then if we go to the main front elevation, or one
I think we have to go back.
back. What is a height that you're looking for this bridge? I noticed it was dimensioned as 19 foot 6 inches. Is there a certain size height that you need for vehicles and cranes or something to get in there? What's your minimum?
It's just the fire department requirements. Basically, what we're doing is our building is 21.4, I think, to this parapet line, and this is just showing basically a railing going up above that. So it's, that would be another, not even 3 feet. It's looking the way it's drawn. It would be obviously 42 inches if it's a railing.
So if this was 21 feet to the top, you're about a 9-foot plate in each of your units inside?
8'10". Right on. Yeah.
Okay.
I figured that out.
Thank you much.
Sure.
Gary?
Yeah, I had a couple of questions. One of them, I guess most of them have been answered about the fencing. The gate in the front, what material is that?
That's a metal gate. In terms of operations, that's intended to be open during all normal hours. It would only be closed in the evenings, but it would be a metal construction.
And what's the height of that gate?
It's not in front of me. I'm going to bet it's around 10 feet because I think it was the same height as one of the units.
Does it show up on any drawing?
It would show up on the architectural set, which is way at the bottom of the file. Let's see if we can answer that. And okay, it's exactly lining up with the plate, so it's going to be 8'10".
And you got the 8'10" because that's the height of the containers?
Exactly.
And the front facade of the building, are those containers, is that going to be the material of the containers or is that going to be glazing? What is that?
Well, it's both.
Is proposed?
As proposed, the container units get modified, right? Because basically they're just a construction form. So facing the street, as you'll see in the illustrated drawing, there's lots of glass. And the intention is to have that facade very activated with large glass windows. In fact, they even have sliding panels behind them. So it's a mixture of the metal of the building as well as the glass. And then there's also frames that have been placed around those windows, which are presumably going to be built out of wood. So it'll have this warmth around the windows.
Are those protruding from the face of the containers?
No, actually they recess.
They recess.
Yeah.
The windows recess?
Here they do, yeah. That's why we have a shadow line. They don't recess far because we don't have that thick a material, but they do recess.
Gary, any more questions?
No, I'll wait for comments.
I know we're very preliminary here, but do you happen to know what the SWMP requirements are there going to be on this lot?
Is that we're talking
stormwater management?
Right. We have not gone that far yet with the civil folks. Penfield and Smith, in fact, have been engaged to be the civil. What we have done is we've gone through and begun our soils analysis, and we have a soils report from Braun for the permeability of the site.
Okay.
And that will be the next step.
Okay. So you haven't looked at any drainage issues because it looks very flat, and I think this plan here shows elevation 13.83 kind of throughout the site.
It is pretty flat. The total existing site varies about a foot from one end to the very far other end. Mm-hmm. We are anticipating that we'll have our cisterns for managing some of the rainwater, mm-hmm. and we also do have the permeable pavement to manage additional. We know we have to meet the new guidelines where we can't be dumping tons of water in the street.
Right.
It's no longer allowed. So
okay, and then you mentioned that you're going to be encouraging less use of the automobile and more bicycling and walking.
Correct.
Do you feel that you have enough bike parking, and where is it located?
Well, right now the bike parking is showing on the plan in front of you in your corner right here.
Right.
And so, I guess we can always look at if we can get more. I mean, the intention also is if people aren't parking their cars in the parking spaces,
use those.
We could park our bikes there. Yeah.
Okay.
There's in terms of the planning process with the city, it's not like we can mandate that.
Right.
But we're hoping that that's how the operations of the site would be managed.
Okay. And then the fences that were being spoken about, the mesh, are you planning on putting vines on those, or is there a reason that you're leaving them open to see in?
Take this one.
Well, I think that's a detail that we have to sort of
down the road,
discuss, I guess, down the road.
Yeah. Okay. And then final question: the gate, the entry gate, those are sliders.
Mm-hmm.
goes to either side.
Correct.
Okay.
In fact, it slides internally. I mean, against the wall. So
Right.
yeah.
Okay, those are all my questions.
I had just a couple about the gates. Did you talk to transportation about that being? I think there's not an issue with commercial with the gates being right on the property. Oh,
We're not
within
on the
20
property
feet?
line.
Within the first 20 feet, you don't have to pull off of the street to.
We're 21 feet off of the street. So I mean,
Off of the sidewalk, out of the right of way. Was there? You might just want to.
Yeah, well, transportation will need to
You
look
might just
at
want
that.
to check that.
okay, we'll check that with transportation. Sure.
One of the things transportation looks at is the visibility as the car pulls out to pedestrians.
Yeah.
So there's a relationship of the setback versus the throat width. So
But don't they also look at the ability to pull completely off of the right of way in order to open and close the gates so that you're not blocking, or is that not in commercial? Okay. I know in residential.
They look at it in commercial too.
In commercial.
But sometimes they look at the hours of operation when the gates will be
So
closed.
just check that about where you're locating that gate.
Yeah, we will. I mean, as you know, transportation has it, but I'll make sure they didn't miss it and surprise us later.
Yeah, good idea. And then I had just one more question about the this kind of catwalk bridge. And you were mentioning it's a requirement from the fire department.
No, the height. I was just saying that we have to keep it above a certain height would be the only requirements fire department. I think someone was interested in knowing if we had heavy equipment coming in.
Oh, I
and they thought
understand.
maybe
They
a
were
crane or
concerned about
something.
this.
And we haven't been
What is it
considering
for?
a crane. It's really just to give, there's probably a little expression on the front of the building to tie them together from an architectural point of view, and then it also gives us access from one side of the roof to the other side, which helps with maintenance.
And then is there, I noticed on two of the elevations, it looks like you have some kind of a vine growing on the fence, on this one and on the south elevation. I was wondering
Well, that's
where that came
that's
from.
us as
That's the green
artistic.
roof?
Yeah, I mean,
there's the bridge, so there's the green roof.
That's a
and then
green
wood.
roof there. I think it's also a little bit of artistic license as architects wanting to introduce landscape elements. So I'll defer to David on this.
David's got to figure out how to get the vines to grow up on that bridge.
I might be
here.
out of line on that.
And it shows up. And it shows up here too.
Yeah.
Point taken.
Your challenge, should you choose to accept. Okay.
Didn't know that wasn't in my brief.
So, comments? Keith?
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to just say I think the program here is really, intriguing and great. So I think, have real support for that. To look at the site planning, maybe starting at the street, working back, I like the front setback. I think the overall kind of site diagram with the central auto circulation and reusing this building back here seems to make sense and be the right one. I might study this relationship at the rear with the open space and the trash and the bike parking. It seems a little maybe unfortunate that the trash enclosure blocks off the open space, and maybe there's some opportunity to kind of terminate the view here with the open space. And so I don't know, maybe something there that I think that could be studied so that you maximize the visibility of the open space and not kind of block it off with the enclosure. And I think, I know you guys are early into it, but I think it would be great, David, if you could just green this space out as much as possible, and with all the stormwater and budget requirements, but with planted, joint paving of some sort or something, so that it reads more as green than auto. Some of the other site planning thoughts. The accessible unit on the ground floor is sort of kind of tight with the parking and looking right into a parking space, so it would be nice to try to study that to mitigate the parking's effect on the view of the unit. Maybe a compact space can go there so you can get some more planting or something in it. But I think that could be studied to sort of mitigate the effects of the auto. Upstairs on the orientations of some of the units, I think the relationship between 208 and 205 is a little awkward, to say the least. That 205's, most of their windows are kind of looking in the back blank side. 208.
Hold on while I catch up and try to find that sheet, so the camera can see it.
A22.
A2.2. All right. There we go.
So yeah, I think the relationship of the fenestration here with that, and then kind of likewise here, and then this guy's kind of turning a blank wall to an open space. So anyway, I think some of those issues need to be studied in that area to kind of open up the livability and sort of the views of those units. So I think that's kind of it for the site planning thoughts. It seems like solar panels work pretty nice on a flat roof, unlike 15th century clay tile. I think I look at the property line walls, and I know that potentially down the road someday someone may build another commercial building zero lot line to zero lot line, but I don't know how quickly that'll occur or what the likelihood is. But I would like to see some attempt at some articulation along particularly the southern property line wall with the upper floor to create something other than the big flat plane that we have here. And it seems like these stairwells that kind of pull back from the property line might be an opportunity where the building envelope could move in and we could get some sort of articulation there. And, you know, I don't know, since with your stair access, you don't have any external walkways, which I think is really nice. So we're not doing this kind of motel balcony scenario. But that also gives you some opportunity that maybe these upper units could slide in this direction again to create a little more something on that property line. So anyway, throw that out there. I would look to try to do something there to articulate that. Going to the elevation, I think this transparent property line fence thing's kind of intriguing, and I don't know, David, you could mess with that with vines and have some interaction there between the landscape. I think that'd be kind of cool, but I like the idea of being able to see into that open space, particularly if it's treated more like a green space than a parking lot. There's the colored,
Oh, no, it's just here.
the street elevation. Let's see.
One more.
Which one do you want?
You want the
Yeah, right there.
overall
That
street-
one right
Okay.
here. In my mind, I think these two forms are more successful than the one that has more glass. I kind of like the contrast between the bigger opening at the street pedestrian level and the smaller unit. And if you look at a lot of the Spanish stuff around town, there's this kind of play between scales of openings. And so I think maybe you could exploit that more and maybe have kind of a more direct relationship with some of the scale tricks that the Spanish Revival does, but in these new forms. So I kind of like this maybe more than that, and I guess I'll leave it at that. And you talked about maybe using wood to detail some of those secondary elements. I like that direction, and I would encourage you to maybe study having more secondary scale-giving elements, particularly at the street elevation, and whatever those are, some sort of projections of some sort to maybe throw more shadow and give it a little higher level of articulation, particularly at the pedestrian frontage. But I think the mass, bulk, and scale, 20-some feet high and 2 stories is totally reasonable. I think there's those studies of some articulation and then the secondary scale elements architecturally. But I like the general direction.
Great.
Thanks, Keith. Clay?
Thank you, Madam Chair. A lot of what Keith brought up are some things that I was noticing in the plans. I think generally speaking, this project, I'm excited about it, having been somebody involved with the artist community for several years in the Funk Zone and other areas, and watching these kinds of buildings diminish in number. But my general feeling about the project as a design is really good, and it's a good presentation. I think that Keith brought up something that I would like to see as well, is a little bit of articulation. I'm not sure if the second floor needs a step so much, but maybe where the stairs are along the property line. I'm not too convinced yet about the eyebrow bridge over the entry. It's of all the things on the project, to me, that seems a little bit, it just seems a little out of place to me, and I'm not sure if there's another resolution to that, or if the stair on the north end can come up high enough and maybe create another play in the massing. In other words, not requiring us to connect directly over for that access point. Not to say that there couldn't be something bridging over there, but this element along, maybe something lower that acted more as a, maybe the second levels connect, or something that creates that entry arch, so to speak. I second some of Keith's comments about this front elevation, because I find that this part of the building over seems fairly resolved and kind of a really nice composition, and then this almost seems like an appendage that hasn't quite been resolved. And I think applying some of the sensitivities of this and some of the inner elevations might actually kind of inform how this comes together, and that's really an area for me that I think could be improved. Likewise, to Keith's comments about some of these studio units on the second level and the orientation, trying to maximize light for each unit, I think would be beneficial. But the last comment, I think, because I think it'll be brought up a few more times on this, is the skin on this side and the fence. I like the sort of refrigerant panel, the insulated panel look. I think maybe with the play of the volumes pushing in and out, that'll help simplify that and not be such a large mass. But I think it needs a little bit of studying. Maybe it's the color, maybe figuring out the detail on that. And then the fences, I think it's really nice to have a view into the property. I know that the Hi-Fi Club here, they have their parking behind this building in front of that building, so they'll be able to, and Elaine's a big art aficionado, so I know she's excited about this project, but they'll be able to look in and see action. But this side, I'm a little concerned. We don't know what's going to happen there, if anything, and when. So maybe there is a way to treat the sides with a permeability, if you will, that's maybe not 100%, but has a little bit of play with some vines or something that lets you see in but isn't completely open. I think that's my comments for now. I might have a couple later.
Thanks, Clay.
Great presentation. We understand what's going on. To touch upon a couple things, I actually like the bridge idea. One of the buildings that I like on Milpas Street is Milpas Rental, because they have this wrought iron thing that goes across it. We drive underneath. Right. And I think the number is going to be 13.5 feet and you're 19.5. So I think you're a little bit on the high side, but I think it's something fun that you should play with, because I can see how that energizes your building. The difficulty I'm having with this project is this two-story mass next to this commercial building that's one story. And on this side, I don't have a concern at all, because you're here first and they have to marry with what you're doing. I agree with Keith opening up this sides. That's a brilliant idea. But over here, having the two stories next to here is too hard and too harsh. And I have to say that you're coming second. That they're here, and of course, I understand this is going to get demolished one afternoon and there'll be another 2- or 3-story building. But until that happens, the composition of this building, which is well defined and detailed and landscaped next to yours, doesn't look proper. So I kind of was wondering in my mind, floor plan wise, what are options. I asked on the first floor how many storage units you needed, and there was actually 11 versus the 9.
Well, yeah.
Well, let me finish
Sure,
my
go ahead,
thought.
go
I'm looking at the second floor plan.
Right.
I'm wondering if there's a possibility of losing this unit on the second floor, and if you can relocate it down to the first floor. Okay, if you can't, you can't. But what I'm sensing is this hard edge coming up here is too strong and too dominant next to this existing building. And I understand that this existing building is commercial, and you have the rights to build straight up, but we also have to study the character and how it fits in with the adjacent neighborhood. And other projects along the way, if they're already going up next to a two-story building, then it's a natural kind of condition. So I was wondering if there was a possibility of moving this first unit to making it only a one-story unit, and then the two-story further back. I was also thinking in my mind that now you can increase this height because you can have a higher work bay. You can have 12 feet in here instead of just 9. But I have concerns with this. I have concerns with the proximity to the property line in the adjacent building. I'm thinking this building unit is narrower than this one, so maybe this gets skip back or set back a little bit more. Something for you to study and to look at. The materials, I am not familiar with what's being proposed, so I would just need to look at it and become familiar with it. Peter Allen has a building that's made out of the Core-10 steel. You know, it's detailed very nicely. It looks fine. Looks like it belongs. It doesn't look like it's a leftover warehouse or a used building material. So the way this is all being detailed needs to get figured out. And the south elevation for Keith, that was a great idea, and I wanted to make a plug for him that maybe, you know, like in 20 years when someone wants to build here, you can ask them to build around your light well.
Okay.
Touche. Gary.
Thanks. Exciting project. I think it's a needed project in our community, and I look forward to it happening. Keith's comment about opening these up, it's great, but I think it needs a little bit more than that. I mean, oddly enough, it looks boxy. And I think it needs some articulation. I think you need to, I think you do need to offset some of these boxes and give it some articulation, to give it some more architecture, so it's just not so linear. One of the things that concerns me is the height of the fences and the height of the gate. I think they're not really human scale, so when you come up to this building and you've got this 10-foot high gate or 8'6" high entry as you come in there, I think it's too much, and I think that needs to be dropped down. And another thing that bothers me on the site plan issue wise is the entry. The entry is, we're walking up some stairs, so we really don't have an ADA access as we go in here. The only ADA access we have is up through this gate area. So this kind of concerns me, and it concerns me of how we approach the building. And I know there was some talk about how these two incorporate well with each other, but what's not working well with me on this project is...
Which page do you want? I'll help you.
2.1. Let's see. No, I think I want the elevation front floor.
You want the colored elevations?
Yeah, colored elevation. Right here.
Which one?
The front street elevation.
Front would be right here.
So what concerns me about this, I mean, we're talking about these two elements being well, but what concerns me is about the focus of the entry, and that there isn't a real focus of this, of where the entry is. This is our automobile entry, although you envision it as people walking through there and using it as an open space. In fact, that is an automobile entry, and this courtyard area should be a little bit more inviting to the public, so the public should be able to go into this courtyard area. And I think this should be accessible ADA, and it should be really visible to the public that this is where you come in to visit somebody, that their units are through these doors. And that's how I, maybe with some canopies or something that comes out that articulates that.
Okay.
The bridge element, there's been some people speaking about that. I'm actually not in favor of of connecting the two buildings together. Maintenance-wise, I think they're both accessible through staircases, and given this 20-foot space to walk across is not really going to make it that much faster maintenance-wise.
Green roof, though?
So I feel like the bridge element isn't really helping. So, it's just it's just how I see it. So, and as far as that goes, I talked about the fence height and just building articulation. That would be my focus. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, Gary. Chris?
I love the project also. Done a lot of really nice things here. I think Keith had mentioned trying to incorporate as much planting as possible, and that's obviously down the road, but one of the things I'm looking at is that bridge across, and I think to me it's a good opportunity to grow some vines up behind the gate and have them connect at the top and create like a green archway. Just as one idea, but also to sort of maybe incorporate some vines throughout, little planter pockets to sort of soften the interior as well. As far as the tree planting in the interior, I think it might be a good idea to get a little more canopy style tree, maybe a little wider canopy, so that you have the sort of, if you're not able to get more planting in there, you actually have the feeling of having more green with a wider canopy. I like the idea of using native plants, and I think we just need to, you're going to need to make sure they're real tough plants. I think the heuchera might get stepped on and maybe sort of disintegrate rather quickly. And then as far as the parking and the bike parking, I mean, I would love to see one or two of these parking spaces dedicated to bike parking, sort of even to make a statement, and maybe transportation could give in once and allow that to happen. If that's sort of what the program is going to be, that would be nice to see. And then Keith's point also about the trash and recycling area, I think seeing that rotated would allow connection between that patio area and the activity space, and also probably give you a larger planter in there on the interior side of that. So I would study the orientation of that building. And then I think that's about it. It was just mainly encouraging additional planting wherever possible to soften the hardness of this. But I like it.
Great.
Thanks.
All right. I agree with a lot of the comments. I think it's a fantastic project, and I think the most fun is going to be how these units relate and come together from a detail standpoint. And I think that's where the success of the project from an aesthetic point of view is going to be, and it's also going to be really important. And you're hearing that from all the other board members too, that it's a really interesting approach, and the materiality is interesting, and how it all comes together, detail-wise, is going to be really important. I agree with the comments that were made about the bridge. That I think it's important how it brings the project together, and that's kind of the purpose of that bridge. But I don't see it quite yet. That it's bringing the project together. It kind of just looks like it's sitting on top. And so I like that kind of gateway concept. But I'm not sure how that works with that bridge being so high, and then how the other forms work around it without it making the whole thing look too tall. Or there's other ways of providing roof access to green roofs and from one building to the next, but and it could work. So just look at that. And I do agree with the comments that were made about the materiality on the north and the south property lines, and it looks, even the way it's been rendered, I think probably prompted some of the comments, Barry, that on the east it's kind of looks softened, and then on the north and south it looks kind of just maybe just because of the line quality being harder, and that's not understanding what that material is going to be. But again, it's how it's connected, and I like Keith's comment about the undulation or providing some relief and some shadow instead of it just being a straight run of that same material. Be a little sensitive to those property lines. And other than that, I agree with most of the comments. I agree with providing as much landscaping as possible, and trying to fit that in wherever you can, and using that with the fencing, I think, is a great idea to soften that. So that's all I have. Would anybody like to take a stab at a motion?
Madam Chair. So I guess this would be indefinite continuance back to full board with the following comments. The board is very supportive of the project program and looks forward to its development. Overall, the board is comfortable with the overall site planning and asks the applicant to study the relationship of the common open space, trash, recycling area, and bicycle parking. Study ways to add articulation to the, I'm going to call it the south property line elevation, either with building mass articulation and or use of color and material to break up the property line wall. Study creating a more articulated pedestrian entry and incorporating ADA ramp access and all that. Study the street elevation of Unit 113 and its relationship with the adjacent workshops, street facades. The board is mixed on the use of the bridge element to connect the two sides of the project. It looks, I guess, for further study and development of that to convince us one way or the other whether it stays or goes. Look forward to development of the landscape plan, including incorporating as much planting as possible and the further use of the canopy trees and studying the relationship of landscape planting material with the property line fences and the development of the articulation of the fences as far as heights and the relationship with the adjacent building masses. I think that's all I have.
Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Clay. Under discussion.
Sure. There was no comment about studying the relationship of the second-story unit in the front next to the one-story commercial on the north. Is that something you're not concerned about?
Madam Chair, if I may, I'm not concerned about it, given that it's only 21 feet high and it's 2 stories, and that's a fairly diminutive, I mean, that's a converted house, so I just don't think it's a huge scale issue myself. I don't know if I'm second.
Okay, so it's not in the motion. So.
Correct.
I had just a couple of things. There was a comment that I liked about studying the fenestrations between the individual units and how they relate to one another.
Yeah.
I thought that was really good.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yes.
And that might have been your comment.
It was. That's what happened at
And
5:30.
I think that's important. I think it was a good comment. So if that could be added in. And then, I think that was it for me. Is it?
So I guess we'll add a comment to study the fenestration and orientation of units 208, 205.
Maybe just all the units, how they all relate to one another. Okay. Or,
Well, I think in particular there's some problematic issues here.
Okay,
The other
go ahead.
ones, kind of leave the architects.
So, you want to list them? Do you want to list those? Just those two?
Yeah.
Okay.
They're saying 50 feet. This is
Any other discussion items?
There was one item concerning the width of the canopy of the proposed trees, and I would just, I guess, maybe say consider utilizing.
I believe I did indicate incorporation of more canopy material.
Oh, you did? Okay, sorry.
And as much landscape as possible. That could be in that same comment.
Yeah.
Okay. Further discussion?
I know there wasn't a lot of discussion on this, other than the articulation of the building, but I'm just wondering if the board is completely happy with how the elevations are on the side elevations, how stark they are without any fenestration.
No, we made one of the items was to study further articulation of the north and south property lines.
You said with articulation or coloration.
I said articulation of using building mass and color material.
Can I speak up to you?
Well, I think thinking the applicant gets the general point. We want to see some articulation there, not just a
It's not
long
quite
blank
working
plane.
Okay.
So.
And I just want to say that we would have liked to do fenestration, but it's a 2-hour, fire line.
And Barry, you understand what you're hearing from us is that it's not quite there.
Right, no, I totally got that. And I hear articulation. But fenestration I would love to do, but that, unfortunately, is precluded.
Unless you move the buildings back, which
Significantly.
destroys your program.
Well, we couldn't get the parking.
Right.
The thing that you have to understand on this project is parking has really driven it to an extent. Like
Oh, that's a new one.
Of course. And I loved your comment. Like, could we just have a stand and put a bicycle stand, in the parking spaces? The parking is crazy, but it's what drives it. So we don't have a lot of movement to push back
We
from the
understand.
property lines.
All right. Further discussion. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
I'm going to oppose it, and it's just because of this front unit being as tall as it is against the existing one-story commercial.
Okay. Abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
What does SoCo mean?
Pardon me?
What does SoCo mean?
South Dakota. This,
South Dakota.
It's like NoHo, Soho.
I knew it was south of something. I'm like, what does the co mean? It's not Carrillo.
Great. Thank you, guys.
Okay, so that concludes the Architectural Board of Review for tonight, November 15th. Thank you for
Great. Thank you very much.
you, guys.
tuning in.